if you didn't use Okay, let us continue and see how far we get with Unit 2.3. So, Unit 2.2 was looking at the novice researcher. 2.3 is now meeting in the middle where you are leveling up to your master's level researchers, right? So, that is why they say in the middle and multi-positioning of your master's level researchers. This we look at the first aspect, which touches on experiential learning. So a lot of the stuff that they've learned in the postgrad qualification at honors level, they would now carry over onto whatever they learned, they would carry over onto their master's level. So improving or enhancing their research journey. So as we said, students learn a particular style as they move up. So from what they would have learned at secondary level education and then coming into tertiary level, your first year of your diploma, um, how they write, how they read, how they comprehend and understand information, um, how they retain the information at diploma level, then moving up to your post grad level, which is the honors level, then your master's, then your PhD, right? It's different levels of learning, different levels of maturity, and obviously each time you are improving your academic literacy skills, your reading, your writing skills, understanding, communicating, and also research skills when you have the research component. So now we're looking at the master's level, and the master's level is a little more advanced than your postgrad honors level. And master's degree students can be categorized in many different ways, including the main reason for registering for this qualification. But one of the broadest of category distinctions is that between young adults who proceed from their first degree to honors and then to masters with little or no professional experience in the field, because some of them may not even be working, so they don't have that experiential learning, right? And I'm going to give you an example just now. We're also looking at those who have worked in their professional fields for some time before returning to academia, either as full-time or part-time master students. So I've had both, and it's something I'm sure you may relate to, or you will probably relate to in the future if you are a new supervisor. Um, those of us that have experienced this. So I've experienced that progression where I've taken students from their diploma to their BTech, to their advanced diploma, which is now the advanced diploma, and then from the advanced diploma into the postgraduate diploma, which is the honors level that you guys are familiar with, right? Honors degree. So, like I said, levels of learning is different, levels of comprehension and communication is different. And it's a gradual progression from these stages right up to master's and then going to doctorate. You have students that I've had students that are not working, have not gained that experiential learning, because a lot of the research that is done has to be conducted outside of the university in terms of because we work a lot with the manufacturing service sectors and they conduct it in that particular industry, those sectors. And then we narrow it down to specific industries where if they wanted to look at manufacturing, they'd look at printing and packaging industry, um, metal and steel industry, pharmaceutical industry, so it narrows down the research. But the only way it narrows the scope of the research is if they are working in that environment. That is where the experiential learning comes in, because they're coming in with the knowledge, right? Because they have this professional experience behind them. But then you have students that don't, that just continue to progress right up to their master's level without having that background, right? Then you have students that come in after 25 years where they have the experience, they don't have the qualification, and They're coming back after so many years and they want to progress onto the masters. Those students, much like the honors students, need to be guided a little more than seasoned researchers because they don't have that background. You have artisans coming back from 20 years of working, need to obtain a qualification, decide to do they gain entry into, they meet the requirements, gain entry into the master's program, but then they don't have that research component. And this is where you as supervisor comes in now to guide them and help them on that research journey. So this is why we say positioning them to know you have a variety of master's students coming from different disciplines, different backgrounds, um, that will articulate into this program. But how do you address these students that, like we said, the ones that coming in after so many years, they have the professional experience, they're coming in. Then you have those that don't have that experiential learning, don't have the professional experience, but will still continue to study with no break in between. Don't even have job, maybe it's hard to get the jobs or hard for them to gain that work experience, but there's a lot of factors that contribute to that, right? So what is it about this experiential learning that we are talking about? Is it a hindrance or help, or is it hindrance and helping? Is it either or? So Cooper 2014, in reflecting over the 10 years of supervising postgraduate thesis writing at a master's level, suggests that many of the highly experienced practitioners who enroll into the programs as adult learners do so because they have a powerful desire to make their voices heard. So their identity to come out into their research because they at a certain level of professionalism where they're working, and obviously they have a lot of insight and experience and knowledge to impart. She lists a number of questions for such students and their supervisors to address. First one being, what role can adult learners working knowledge or professional experience play in their postgraduate research? What status should be accorded their prior experience, and what risks are involved in drawing on professional experience as a source of new knowledge? What role can this experience legitimately play in the writing of the research, and how should it be viewed or treated by the supervisor in terms of the postgraduate pedagogy? Let's look at the first three, right? So what is the role of that adult learner in having all this knowledge and experience? What status should be accorded to this prior experience, professional experience that they have? And are there any risks involved of bringing about this new knowledge? What role can this experience legitimately play in the writing of research? Anyone? Tony?
Uh, Prof, I have a comment that might not be directly answering the question, but I I I do have experience of a student who has come back to do their studies, and the student is in their late 40s, early 50s. And what I've noticed is that within the classes, because they were unfortunately forced to do honors, and honors has coursework,
Yeah.
they are a source of inspiration for the younger students. They inspire them in terms of when there's a lack of understanding sometimes, they then chip in and bring some sort of insight. They are very forthcoming in the class. So that experience does feed back into the general research group. However,
Yes.
the risk is that the student, because the student is knowledgeable, you don't want to have them dominate the conversation, or you don't want to have the others now hide behind that voice because they know there's a knowledgeable voice in the room. So negotiating that space it has been quite interesting, but I also do think that the student themselves have has to be teachable. As much as they are knowledgeable, they are there to learn certain skills. It's not a good kind of relationship if the student is coming from a point where they know already and they are just sitting through the supervision, as checking the box.
Most definitely. Because what happens is, and I've experienced this as well, right? Um, we have students that come in with this wealth of knowledge and experience. And I've had where it was an advantage because they're imparting that knowledge. As you said, they're imparting that knowledge onto their fellow students that don't have that experience. They're bringing in that wealth of knowledge, helping out. But then I've had at a master's level, so at the master's level, we do full research, right? So it's not taught modules or anything like that. It is full research. So I've had a student, currently, actually have a student working in tire manufacturing, right? Um, and part of this tire manufacturing is what is called, and something completely new to me, I had to learn about this process, is called, if I can pronounce it correctly, homologation process, right? Something completely new to me. But apparently, it happens, but it was something that mainly occurred internationally and not on a South African perspective. So they're trying to bring that in here. And again, it's new information, it's new knowledge, but it's something that this student's company, being a tire man, one of the tire manufacturers in South Africa, is trying to implement or integrate, um, because it's to do with the entire, I think, the inside of the tire and how they do the threads and stuff like that. So it's called homologation or something like that, right? So something completely new South Africa is not doing. So is it posing a risk because you are now the only company that's doing that? What about the other tire manufacturers, right? You're bringing about new knowledge. I can understand why they want to bring about new knowledge, but then there's also the aspect of, is there literature? Because you have to do a literature survey, and is there related literature that's going to help you support this claim? You're only going to get an international perspective. You're not going to really get African or South African perspective because it doesn't exist here. It's not a process that we're actually using, but they've already started it. So that also posed as a bit of a risk in that conducting the research when it came to literature, we didn't have enough, we still don't have enough information to draw up that part of the study, to do the literature survey, because we don't have enough literature based on it. Internationally, yes, we can show what is being done, but obviously we have to show some part of it being a South African context, but we're trying to work around it. I actually had to get someone much more senior to me to actually help me on the study. So we don't always know everything, but yes, it's something that can pose as a risk. So this is what we say. Having that knowledge, bringing in new knowledge, you don't know what you setting yourself up for. But we can say add to the existing body of knowledge that's out there, which is generally most of the trend of research that's there now. Bring in new concepts, yes, but not something completely new that where you have no background whatsoever for it, if you understand what I'm saying. So that is why it made it a lot difficult and risky with the research. So yes, it's an advantage when these adult learners come in with the working knowledge and the experience, because they impart that knowledge on others in their classroom that do not have that, right? um Prior experience, have what is the risk? Like we said, there are some risks involved, especially when there's a source of new knowledge that's out there. What role can this experience legitimately play in the writing of research? It helps in that we're bringing in this knowledge. We have industry experience, so it's hands-on experience. It's not just what we're reading from other studies or other literature. And then the last one is, how should it be viewed or treated by the supervisor in terms of postgraduate pedagogy? So you as a supervisor now, and this is why I said there's different learning levels. And on Saturday, we did touch on what was called andragogy and pedagogy. Pedagogy for me is a learner coming out of grade 12 into their first year, second year. So as they mature with their studies, their level of understanding gets better, the level of writing improves, the reading improves, skills get enhanced. Then you come to your third, fourth year, fifth year, which is more andragogy, andragogy, because it's now dealing with an adult learner, someone that's more mature in their thinking, coming straight out of school, their thinking is not the same as someone on a honors level, which is your fourth or fifth year, right? So this is where you as a supervisor needs to weigh when you are supervising them and how they write and how they present their work, portray their research. You have to look at their level of understanding and their level of maturity as well. That's where these pedagogies come in, and it's very, very important because, like I said, the way I would write, being at an associate professor level, the way someone would write being at a full professor level, as opposed to somebody that's just starting off as a lecturer doing research, how would they write? It's different levels and skills that they would have. So, how do you supervise your students at those different levels of learning? Everyone with me? Can we move on? Thumbs up. Thank you very much. Okay. So the challenges of entering a new linguistic. So either new linguistic, disciplinary, discourse, sociocultural space. How do we deal with these different challenges that we are opposed to? So you've got two vignettes, which we are going to read. We are on 1, 2, 3, vignette 1. Let's go through the first one and then you will do the next one on your own. Because you need to dissect, right? So let's dissect this page 25, vignette 1. It gives you a scenario of reading and writing in language not previously used for academic work and was particularly challenging for two students who had already established a scholarly identity. And we spoke about writing in different languages, and when it comes to South African context, preferred mode of presenting your work is English medium, right? So let's look at the first vignette 1. Emmanuel Sibomana has published his reflections on the culture shock of moving from successful completion of an honors degree in Rwanda, for which he read and wrote in French, to beginning his MA studies at a South African university in English. During my undergrad years, I was never initiated into academic literacy in any specific or systematic way. Nevertheless, in my final year, I was expected to do research and to write a research report. This was the first time I had been expected to deliver an assignment using academic writing. I relied on what my predecessors had done. Most of my peers had written in a descriptive way, and I took this route. For me, knowing a concept or theory meant being able to summarize, explain, and reproduce it, usually without analyzing and expressing my own opinion about it. I was not familiar with approaching issues from different and sometimes conflicting perspectives, creating a debate or constructing an argument using other people's ideas. In short, I was educated using the banking approach described by Frere 1968. On arrival at the South African universities, my studies has marked a turning point in my approach to academic writing, but my adaptation to the university's academic writing discourses was not achieved without challenges. From being a top student and a university tutor with some additional work experience as a translator, I became a struggling student faced with four main challenges: writing economically, synthesizing other writers' ideas, developing an argument while making my own voice heard, and ensuring that my style did not sound odd. So let's stop there. So here is someone coming from a background where they had to write in French, and we touched on this on Saturday. And we came across some students that come into the South African universities, and now you have to write in English. And I gave you an example of one of the students that I had, which was a PhD student, and he's from DRC and obviously reading, writing, speaking in French. And up until today, he will write in French and then he converts or translates it into English. Right, and he still does that. He did that for his master's. I supervised him for his master's. He did that also for his PhD. But where the downfall was is that the arguments that he was making got lost in translation literally, because converting from French into English, sometimes the sentences get reconstructed and then it changes the context of what you are trying to say. Because you may mean something in French, but it means something completely different in English. So kind of similar scenario with the Vignet 1, in that this student now in their honors was writing in French, reading in French, doing everything in French, and then comes to South African institution and then has to do everything in English. It's a bit difficult and it's going to be challenging. Also, you're not just studying from a textbook and regurgitating and writing your answers in a final exam. You have to pose proper arguments, criticisms, analysis, evaluations, investigations, and also put in your voice, right? Where we said, state your claim, supported by reference. Always put in your opinions, your perspective on things, and then we have authors that would support what we are saying. And then he found it difficult, obviously, because to build an argument, to write an argument, to write an essay and stuff, and that is not easy. Unless you take the approach that my PhD student took, which was write in French, translate. But then again, it comes with its own challenges in that the sentence constructions and stuff changes when you are doing translating. So this is the approach that was used here. So writing economically was a challenge because up until this point in my academic career, I had been rewarded for writing as much as I could. I recall one of my lecturers stating that the bigger the piece of the writing is, the more ideas it contains. And the phrase is not less than so many words was common in an essay question, because we can relate to that, because in essay question it tells you no less than 200 words, no less than 500 words. Also, when you're writing for publications, your abstract, it tells you no less than 150 words. Introduction or literature, no less than 1,000 words. So you are restricted to the number of words you are actually writing. So it's not only about writing more, but you've got to bring or narrow your argument to just that 200 words or 1,000 words. So related to this challenge was the difficulty of synthesizing ideas of other scholars. Instead of producing a concise summary of ideas, I would want to provide their extended expositions. Cutting the work down was a challenge because I thought deleting some of the important ideas would compromise the quality of the work. Fortunately, my supervisor and I established a relationship in which we were able to negotiate what to delete and what to retain, which is important because some of the stuff may be unnecessary because you just want to write more. And my students also guilty of this and that. They want to write more just so that they can make up pages. And they always ask me when they're submitting, how many pages is chapter 1? How many pages is chapter 2? And I keep telling them it's not the quantity, but the quality of the work that you are producing. And you need to know what to leave out and what to add, what is relevant towards your argument and your writing. I would sometimes retain some of the things that my supervisor wanted to delete and reduce my anxiety about losing any of my previous or my precious ideas. Conversely, I sometimes reluctantly let go of the chunks of my text and was left feeling that something important has been lost. Most of the time, my supervisor would allow me the final choice. So at the end of the day, it's your research and it's what you want to put in there. I think supervisors are quite flexible in the information that we are putting, and it comes to compromise. You have to have that relationship with your supervisor. So quickly, 2 minutes or so, anyone wants to weigh in on this? Had any experience like that, or as a student, as a supervisor, or heard any stories, much like the one I just mentioned about my PhD student, Masatuka?
I had this experience with activity 1.4, I think, about the translanguaging.
Yes.
It was very easy for me to articulate what I wanted to say in English. And then when I had to then translate it to Sesotho, which is what one of the requirements of the activity, I struggled to kind of pull through exactly what I was trying to say. So yeah, I totally understand what Sibomana is saying.
Most definitely. We try to translate and, like I said, get lost in translation. Anyone else? So you'll find that a lot of these stories and a lot of these case studies and the Vignet 1, Vignet 2 and stuff like that, it's going to be relatable. And it's going to be relatable to us because as we mentioned previously as well, English is not most of us our first language. So it's difficult coming into English medium schools, universities, especially when you have a background and you've only spoke, written, read in a certain language or in a certain way. Okay, let's do the next one and then we can close for today and catch up on Saturday. Okay, so the next one, who wants to read? Do you want to read Vignet 2 and then we just dissect it for a few minutes and then move on?
I will do. I don't mind. I'm just trying to find it.
Okay, sorry, it's on page 26 at the bottom, Vignet 2.
26. Right, can you hear me?
Yes.
So Makazi Day chose to write her master's thesis in isiXhosa, her mother tongue. Her research investigated the teaching and learning of mathematics using isiXhosa to formulate equivalents of concepts in English that seemed to create difficulties for learners. In addition to documenting the challenges of finding appropriate supervisors and examiners in terms of disciplinary focus and linguistic competence, Day reflects on her concerns about the discourse in which she was expected to write in isiXhosa. To keep things simple, one had to comply with the supervisors, although I was tempted to write the thesis in a way that felt significant to me. Initially, I thought I could challenge the process because there seemed to be little point in using isiXhosa if it was going to be denied its naturalness. However, it became clear that the supervisor was bound by a standard academic writing norms, so I had to refrain and do as advised. However, removing the characteristics of the language meant that there were times when it did not feel as if I was actually writing isiXhosa. Removing my feelings for the language meant that all intimacy was lost. In fact, the process defeated what I imagined could be achieved by writing in my mother tongue. I wanted to write in a way that included all the ingredients that make isiXhosa the beautifully rich and creamy language that it is, to exploit its full potential. Unfortunately, scientific discourse had to be observed, and this left little space for what I wished to do. I must say that I still see this as a loss.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Eureka. And then it says, while Day pleads for a reconsideration of thesis formats and a broadening of what is accepted as an academic discourse, she makes it clear that using the richness of one's primary language does not mean removing or ignoring scientific norms and standards. So this is kind of what I mentioned in that we were losing the essence. Sometimes we're losing the essence, and maybe writing in a certain linguistic and you think it may not be scientific because, and then also that how the style of writing, because remember there's certain templates and formats and stuff we have to follow, and it's all in English, right, at South African universities. But you also have to look at not just the translation, but getting your message across by using different languages. And this is where we spoke about the translanguaging, right? And for one, we did speak about supervisors speaking in that specific language and reading and writing in that specific language. And then how many supervisors are you going to have? Then you have examiners. So if you want to continue writing in a specific language, you're going to have to get the relevant examiner that's going to also speak, read, and write in that language also. So you don't lose the context. So this is the things that we are looking at. And with us being multilingual, a rainbow nation where we have the most languages, one of the countries that has the most languages, it's difficult because we see moving into, like I said, cultural, diverse country with multiple languages, you can't restrict, and I think we discussed this the first session, we cannot restrict the learner or the researcher from writing in their language because it's not going to get lost. You know what you're trying to say. Like I would write in my language, I would know what I'm trying to say, but the person reading it loses all context unless that person knows the language as well. Eureka?
We actually had this conversation in the car on my way. I'm in Mobella at the moment. That, we had a project with African storybooks that students wrote in the 4th year,
Yeah.
and they then had to translate it into English. The first time we did it, we started with English, which they had to translate into one of the African languages. We do isiNdebele, Isiswati, and Sepedi.
Okay.
It was very difficult because you can't just translate. You lose the second level of the language. You lose, as you said, the cultural context. The way a thing is said, if you do it in a different language, you don't always get the same meaning across.
Yes.
There's definitely a change in meaning, and that is quite tricky. And I find that many of my students, I'm also a second language speaker of English, but I find many of my students are so great. But when they write, they don't write on the next level. They are just surf on the surface. And that means that a lot of meaning is lost in their writing, which makes it very sad because it's not a language test. It's supposed to be a test of their adequacy at research.
Yes.
Yeah, that's all
And
I
you
want to
lose
say.
that, and thank you so much. And you lose the essence of what's coming out of the research. Like, for example, you use Google Translate or Copilot or ChatGPT, right? Write something in your language and then try and translate it. Does it translate it into what you know it to be in English? Or does it give you a completely different context? Right? And I've tried it. I've played around with it. Some languages, it messes it up completely and you lose the essence of what you're trying to say. And especially with research and when it's being going through an examination process, your examiner is going to be lost. So translating, I think we also spoke about this the last time about incorporating now the different languages into the new South African universities because of the diversity that you get in multilingual students. And are we catering to them? Because most of them are not, English is not their first language. So yeah, things to actually think about. 2.3 continued. Still looking at multi-positioning of the master's level student. Then 2.4 goes on to doctoral students and their identity. So quickly, just looking at the last part of 2.3, and then I want to start 2.4 on Saturday. By his own admission, we're going back to Vignet 1. Emmanuel has managed to write an honors level research report by mush faking. Mush faking is pretending to be something that you're not, and not putting your identity in there, right? But when he changed universities, countries, and academic language, his scholarly identity was severely challenged. While the relationship with his supervisor was not that of equals, it was one which enabled negotiations so that at least some of Emmanuel's ideas appeared on the pages of his research report, meaning that his identity got lost, his opinions and thoughts got lost in that research. The challenges faced by Day are not very common in South African universities because so few students write in African languages, but they raise important questions at the level of the university, policies, transformation to incorporate and integrate these languages. These researchers investigated whether Black students at the University of KwaZulu-Natal able to write in an African voice, either in English or in African language. As they explain, the construct voice or own voice signifies person of the author, the person of the author as visible in the text being produced, and is considered by many to be prerequisite for successful development of scholarly identity. So basically what's happening is that Doing a test or just sampling to see whether students writing in a different language and or an African language or any language for that matter, and a student writing in English, how different are your thoughts that are coming out? Writing in one's own voice is that's integral to your development of your identity. The responses of the two students interviewed were raised by day. Education system has killed the energy of writing as an African, and this is where we say bring in the decolonization, try and bring in these languages. If I was expressing the African views, I would not be writing in English. English has a certain way of expressing things, a tone you have to take when you write. Obviously, writing in a different linguistic, how you speak and how do you try to convey something in a different language is not the same as how you portray it in English. Like I said, that essence is not there. There's a certain way that, you know, you would say quotes and stuff like that, but it just loses it when you convert it to English. Okay, so you can read further on 2.3. So we're just basically saying this is how you get lost in translation because you're trying to adopt the Western ways, but our culture is not the Western way. It's the African way, and taking into consideration that we're now embedding decolonization into the syllabus, why aren't we using or integrating the African languages into the syllabus as well? All right. Any questions up until that point, and then we will catch up on Saturday. Anyone? So you have activity 2.1 and an activity 2.2 that you need to do by Saturday. All right. Just play around with it, then start uploading all your activities and your assignments as we go along. And then on Saturday, we will discuss your assessment dates and stuff like that for the remainder of your assessments. All right, thank you so much for giving me your time this evening. I hope this has been informative and insightful. It's a learning experience every day. We learn a lot about research and our experiences with students and other supervisors and examiners. So have a good evening, and I will see you on Saturday morning. We're starting at 8 o'clock on Saturday. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Prof.
No problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Prof. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Prof. Be good. Bye-bye, everybody.